Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Real glad that you could join us for another segment. We're going to be speaking with Dr. Chris Ianelli. He's joining us here as co-founder and CEO of iSpecimen to talk about the company's proprietary global marketplace where researchers can search for and find millions of human biospecimens across this vast network of healthcare providers quickly and compliantly in order to support their medical research. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Dr. Chris Ianelli.
Oh, thank you, Neil. Nice to meet you.
You as well. Well, give us a brief insight into who Dr. Chris Ianelli is and talk about how you came up with the idea to form iSpecimen.
Thanks, Neil. So, as you said, I'm the founder, at least one of the founders, and the chief executive officer of iSpecimen. Maybe a little bit about my background will help you understand how this idea came about. I'm trained originally as a scientist. I'm an immunologist, trained here in Boston, that then went on to medical school, and then following medical school, trained in the clinical laboratory as a laboratory medicine physician. And I left the practice of medicine about 20 years ago with a company that I started that took me into the world of healthcare investment banking, where I started a healthcare data company for the healthcare investment bank. And the idea behind iSpecimen really grew out of all the different areas that I touched with my education and training. At the bench as a researcher, as a clinician in the clinical laboratory, and then as someone that helped work on a company to get healthcare data flowing to the different commercial entities that needed it. And we had this idea where we saw what was happening after the sequencing of the human genome. Mm-hmm. And from conversations I was in at the time, we heard lots of companies, biotechnology companies, pharmaceutical companies, and diagnostic companies talking about how they needed more and more biological specimens from patients to do all of the work that they needed to do on R&D to drive development of their products, either a therapeutic or a diagnostic product. So we envisioned a world where we could build an Amazon-like platform to connect the world of life science research to the world of healthcare providers. There was no such platform, and we were the first ones to come up with it.
Speak briefly about how cumbersome it is to collect these specimens.
Yeah, well, you nailed it. It is cumbersome. And I think part of why we were the first ones to come up with this business model, a marketplace business model, that Amazon-like platform that I mentioned, is because it is very difficult to do. You have to have on both sides of your platform, on one side, the customer side, you have to have a need for what you're connecting them to. And that certainly does exist. It's a multi-billion-dollar need for access to patients, biospecimens or samples from those patients, and data from those patients. On the other side of the platform is where it's challenged. You have to be able to tap into those data sets in the electronic medical record system or whatever systems are being used by those healthcare providers. And you have to be able to do that in a secure and compliant way. So what you're trying to do, if you're a platform play like iSpecimen, is gain access to those data sets securely and compliantly to gain visibility into patient characteristics that may exist within the healthcare provider's operations so that you can offer those patients whose data you can see the opportunity to make specimens available of themselves. Patients very quickly understand that there's a benefit to making specimens available from themselves for research purposes because they understand by doing so the research that follows is going to help maybe them, but most likely their kids, their grandkids, and certainly patients like them. So patients want that opportunity to contribute, but they're not always offered that opportunity, and that's something that we're democratizing for them.
How exactly does the iSpecimen marketplace work toward that end?
So think of Amazon or any other marketplace platform for that matter, whether it's Kayak or Match.com or for babysitting, there's Care.com. We work the same way. We offer to our customer base, which is the world of life science researchers, those researchers typically at the bench, as I said, that have a need for accessing patients, biospecimens from those patients and data sets. We offer them a single platform where they can now log in and search for what they're looking for. And the way that they do it is just as they would search for merchandise on Amazon or whether they would search for a babysitter on Care.com. Mm-hmm. They put in the characteristics that they're looking for, and we will then do the matchmaking for them. We will look across our network of healthcare providers made up of hospital systems, private practice groups, commercial laboratories, anybody across the healthcare provider landscape that has patients flowing through their doors. We've taken data from them, and we are matchmaking based on what we see in our network, researcher needs, so that they can then select those patients and samples for research projects. And once they make that selection, we then message the healthcare provider that either a sample in their possession or a patient encounter that they're about to have is something that can satisfy the need of that researcher, so that they can either pick, pack, and ship the sample if they have it, or collect, pack, and ship that sample off to the researcher. And by doing so, they help generate revenue for themselves in ways that they weren't before they met iSpecimen.
With so many trials and diseases and research opportunities out there, what kind of specimen samples can be found on the platform? Any and all, or are there specific ones for specific uses?
Well, it's both. It is any and all. To answer your question, we can get you any type of biological sample from a human subject, just about. If we can't get it by intersecting with standard of care across medicine, and a good example of that is sometimes you'll get a request for normal, healthy brain tissue for different experiments or for controls for experiments. Now, you're not going to find any surgery or biopsy procedure where patients are going to be offered the opportunity to give up normal, healthy brain tissue. So we do work with sites where patients or people have donated their body to science, so we can then access that material through that sort of a supplier. But we can get any type of sample off of a person that's requested by research, but there are very specific ones that we most frequently come across. The need for either blood, plasma, or serum from patients, or different forms of solid tissue that can be collected through surgical procedures or biopsies. And typically for solid tissue, it's related to cancer research. So researchers working on either a diagnostic or a therapeutic for breast cancer will at some point make a request for different types of breast cancer tissue that we can access from our providers who are doing those resections or procedures to remove malignant tissue from breast cancer patients.
How much of a change did the platform have to undergo based on the COVID-19 situation?
Well, it was not so much of a change, I'd say, but it was certainly a different focus for us. So we have been around as a company for more than 10 years with this idea of building out a network of healthcare providers, building the platform to connect them to the world of life science research. What happened when COVID appeared on the scene in early 2020 was that so many of our customers, those life science researchers that were conducting experiments at the bench, they stopped going to work, as many of us did, as did many of the healthcare professionals across the hospital system that were either picking, packing, and shipping samples for us or collecting, packing, and shipping samples for us. So the focus changed where we would ordinarily get requests for all different disease types. We found ourselves receiving requests for just one disease, and that was for COVID-19 samples. So our job changed a little bit in early 2020 and stayed this way for a couple of years, where our focus was really on just finding those COVID patients and doing collections from those COVID patients to feed those samples into the world of COVID research. And a lot of that work that we did ended up providing samples for the development of new diagnostic tests and other therapeutics for COVID. That's changed a little bit, though. So I think we are seeing the world come back to normal, or what it used to look like pre-pandemic, where we're now seeing more and more requests come through for non-COVID related diseases.
What's up for your company the next year or so?
So we recently went public. We had our IPO in the middle of last year.
Congratulations.
2021. Oh, thank you. And we are now very well capitalized and focused on expanding our platform. As I mentioned earlier, the company has been around for more than 10 years and has done the hard work prior to our IPO of developing the platform and the networks of healthcare providers and life science researchers on either side of that platform, respectively. We are now investing heavily in that platform and in growth of those networks so that we can get connected to more and more patients across the globe and access a greater percentage of the population to have them sampled for different research and development projects across the world of research. So our job right now is to focus on growth and gaining more and more access to power more and more research studies across the world.
Give us a website where we can learn more about iSpecimen.
Well, if you want to learn more about iSpecimen, it is www.iSpecimen.com, and that's the letter I and the word specimen all together. And there you can see information about what we do and how we do it. And there's also a tab for those interested in investments for investors to learn more about the company and what's been made publicly available.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time out this morning and talking with us, Dr. Ianelli. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Dr. Chris Ianelli. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com, Health Professional Radio.